Good evening and welcome. I'm Dr. Laura Taylor, Associate Professor of Theology and the President of the Theta of Minnesota chapter of Phi Beta Kappa here at the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University. I'm delighted to be here with all of you today for our 2023 induction ceremony. I'd like to start our ceremony with our land acknowledgement. The College of St. Benedict and St. John's University occupy the original homelands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe people. We honor, respect, and acknowledge the indigenous peoples forcibly removed from this territory, whose connections remain today. St. Benedict's Monastery and St. John's Abbey previously operated boarding schools for Native children. Now, students, faculty, and staff are working to repair relationships with our Native Nation neighbors. As the president of Theta of Minnesota chapter of Phi Beta Kappa, it is a particular pleasure for me to greet and welcome as our guests the family and friends of our new members. Joining me today and welcoming each of you is our distinguished platform party, the president of the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University, Dr. Brian Brees, Dr. Lewis Johnson, professor of economics and our keynote speaker for the ceremony, Associate Provost and Dean of the Faculty, Dr. Pamela Baker. Look in what order they're lined up in. And Dr. Clark Cotton, Associate Professor of Biology and our chapter Secretary and Treasurer. Dr. Derek Moore, Assistant Professor of Nursing and our chapter's historian. And Dr. Ellie Perelman, Associate Professor of History and our chapter's Vice President. And several of our faculty and staff who are resident members of Phi Beta Kappa are also here to welcome you today. So on the screen now, I have the Phi Beta Kappa key, which I will explain a little bit more about later today. As you will learn in our ceremony, Phi Beta Kappa is rich in its history and traditions. Because this is an academic honor society, it's a tradition for faculty and staff to wear academic regalia at the ceremony, which explains our attire today. We wear these robes as a sign of recognition, achievement, and honor, but also as a sign of respect for you, our inductees, and for all of your accomplishments during your time at St. Ben's and St. John's. We will begin our ceremony with a welcome for the president of the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University, Dr. Brian Brees. Dr. Brees.
Thank you so much, and what a thrill to be here. As I was walking over, I had several students stop me. One was looking at me kind of sideways, and she says, "You know it's not commencement today." And I said, "I'm going to Phi Beta Kappa." She says, "Oh, good." It's so good to be here, and students, parents, St. Ben's, St. John's, faculty and staff, and the Phi Beta Kappa resident members. Thank you, all of you, for being here on this happy and significant occasion. On behalf of both the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University, it's my honor to welcome each of you. Phi Beta Kappa is the nation's oldest academic honor society and was the first college society to bear a Greek letter name. The initials Phi Beta Kappa represent the Greek translation of the society's motto: love of learning is the guide of life. Love of learning is the guide of life. And under that motto, the society stands as one of the nation's oldest champions of the liberal arts, a cause to which we at St. Ben's and St. John's take quite seriously and are deeply committed to. The Phi Beta Kappa selection process is rigorous. You've all earned it. There are only 286 chapters at the college universities throughout the United States. Only about 1% of each year's American college graduates are elected to membership. As new members, you are in distinguished company. Before we continue with our ceremony, I'd also like to recognize and express my and our gratitude for the work of the committee that selected the students for induction. In addition to reviewing the transcripts of many outstanding candidates, they looked not only for excellent grades, but a breadth of coursework in the liberal arts and outstanding academic activities that most often do not show up on transcripts. Can we show some appreciation and gratitude to the committee that selected these fine recipients? And of course, perhaps other than the beginning of an academic year, There is no time more special to be on a college campus than toward the end of the year when the snow has thawed and we start to celebrate the great accomplishments of our students, our faculty, and staff. And so tonight is an especially wonderful evening to be together to recognize these students. So congratulations, inductees, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you, President Brees. Honored guests, today we are welcoming 43 new student candidates for membership and course into our Phi Beta Kappa chapter, 37 seniors and 6 juniors. These student candidates have qualified for election and now wish to be admitted into our Academic Honor Society. We shall welcome them into an association with all those who have been members of Phi Beta Kappa, past and present, and into lifelong membership in the society. While our St. Ben's and St. John's chapter was founded only 13 years ago, this is a ceremony that goes back nearly 250 years to the time of the founding of our nation. Our chapter historian, Derek Moore, will now explain some of the history of the Phi Beta Kappa Society so that you can understand the values and mission of the society today. And this is an image here of a reconstruction of the Raleigh Tavern in colonial Williamsburg, which was the birthplace of Phi Beta Kappa.
Thank you. I've actually had dinner there. It's a very nice place. So, first of all, I want to say how proud I am of you. It's been many moons since I was inducted into Phi Beta Kappa, right around the corner from there. And although I don't remember much from my career back then, I do remember that night very clear, and it was wonderful. And I actually remember the speech, which was pretty amazing. No, I'm not setting up expectations for you. No worries on this. No. On December 5th, 1776, a group of students at the, unfortunately then all-male College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia, met to create a secret society, Phi Beta Kappa, that was both intellectual and social in purpose. The 3 original stated aims of the society were friendship, morality, and literature or scholarship. Their president's greeting to new members in 1779 reads in part, "Here you are to indulge in matters of speculation, that freedom of inquiry that ever dispels the clouds of falsehood by the radiant sunshine of truth." Other Phi Beta Kappa chapters were soon established at Yale and Harvard, and the society continued to grow and improve. In 1875, for example, Phi Beta Kappa enlarged its membership to include women. By 1883, the society had more than 25 chapters, and the United Chapters of Phi Beta Kappa was founded to bring the scattered chapters into some uniformity. The organization had its headquarters in Washington, D.C., and there are now 286 chapters at leading colleges and universities throughout the United States. Phi Beta Kappa takes great pride in its origins, but we believe the society is even more vital and relevant today than it was at our founding in 1776. You are now a part of our storied history, and you are the key to the society's future as we emphasize the ideals of freedom, of expression and civil discourse, and advocate, now more than ever, for the values of the liberal arts and sciences. These values were eloquently summarized in the following statement by one of the society's most eminent members, Charles Evan Hughes, the late Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He said, "The particular interest of Phi Beta Kappa is in liberal education. Intensive critical study of educational aims and methods has found nothing to take its place. Phi Beta Kappa holds aloft the old banner of scholarship, and to the students who have turned aside from the easier paths and by their talent and fidelity have proved themselves to be worthy. It gives the fitting recognition of a special distinction." Then, I think, yep, all right.
Thank you, Derek. Represented by a signature gold key and 3 Greek letters, Phi Beta Kappa offers a credential that has national recognition. Membership affirms our motto, "Love of learning is the guide of life." We'll now ask our initiates to first make a promise, and then to be formally welcomed in as new members of the Theta of Minnesota chapter of Phi Beta Kappa. Will the student candidates for membership and course please rise? In accordance with the rules of the chapter and in consequences of our good opinion of your intellectual character, supported by your record of high achievement at these institutions, you have been selected as worthy of becoming members of the Phi Beta Kappa Academic Honor Society. Your names have been submitted to the scrutiny of the constitutional electors of this chapter and have met with their approval. Your presence here today signifies your desire to become members of this honorable society. Therefore, I now inquire, do you solemnly promise that you will uphold the society's values of intellectual curiosity, critical thinking, freedom of expression, and seek to reflect the credit upon your affiliation with this venerable fellowship of learners? We do. Okay, good. Say a little louder. All right, wonderful, thank you. Each of you has pledged to uphold the values of Phi Beta Kappa, and we will now welcome you into our ranks and register you as a member. You can sit down for a minute. All right. Since Phi Beta Kappa was once a secret society, we also have a secret handshake. The tradition goes back centuries. When two members would pass each other on the street, they would take these two fingers and draw them across their mouths to say that their lips were sealed. Now, when two members meet, it is those same two fingers clasped, and that is the secret handshake. So you extend your first two fingers of your right hand and keep your other two fingers slightly curled. Then, as you shake hands, you grip the first two fingers of the other person's hand with your third and fourth finger. Another way to think of it is dividing your fingers into a V, or the live long and prosper sign from Star Trek, and then folding your last two fingers over my first two fingers. So though the grip fell out of favor in the earliest 20th century, there has been a resurgence of interest in it recently. So you can try it out with me as we welcome you into the chapter, but you're welcome to do a traditional handshake on stage if you prefer. So if you want to start practicing with each other, you can, before you're on stage and before our photographer gets you. So now, would the first row of initiates rise to approach the stage? As our Secretary Clark Cotton calls your name, please come forward to be greeted into the chapter, and you'll sign the chapter register.
Kevin Allen. Christiana Anderson, Emmy Anderson. Autumn Air. Aiden Becken. Allery Chu. Kyle Curfey. Celeste Dixon. Hunter Fisher. Peyton Fisher. Abigail Freeman. Ethan Huber. Aaron Kamuller. Sophia Kelly. Eliana Knutson. Isabel Lessig. Megan Litke. Aaron Long. Kate Luna. Caitlin Meyer. Mahina Mellim. Peyton Miller. Nolan Morey. Miriam Nelson. Grace Nolte. Noah Preseller. Fiona Roscoe. Betsy Ruckman. Jervin Sands. Isabel Schmelzer. Sam Shug. Kian Siasu. James Sims. Fiona Smith. Jacob Spring. Shelby Stavern. Perrin Thompson. Morgan Van Beck. Marley Van Dellen. Elise Vamaka. Ashley Viscachill. Anna Webb and Ian Wilson.
By election of the chapter, by your assent to its pledge, and by the placing of your signature in our registration book, the Society's requirements for initiation are fully satisfied. In the presence of the members of the Society, as well as your friends, mentors, and family gathered here, it is now my pleasure to officially welcome you as new members of the Phi Beta Kappa. Congratulations.
Each year, our student members in course who were elected last year as juniors select the keynote speaker for our induction ceremony. Our chosen speaker this year is Professor of Economics, Dr. Lewis Johnston. I now invite Dr. Johnston to share his address titled Telling Stories.
Thank you, Ellie. And first of all, good afternoon, everybody. I was thinking about this, one of our first induction ceremonies. We had a tornado warning right in the middle of the person who was giving this address. So I'm hoping that that's not the way it's going to work out today. Let me begin by congratulating all of our new members. I have been a member of Phi Beta Kappa, I hesitate to admit, for 41 years. I urge you to all keep in touch with the Society, though, wherever life takes you. When you move to a new place, look up the local chapter and connect with them. It's a great way to meet people and to connect with a new community. There's a quote I use at the beginning of every course I teach, and unfortunately there are a bunch of students here who've already heard this, but life goes on. Humans are pattern-seeking, storytelling animals. I like that quote because it captures something we can all relate to. Seeing a pattern in the sky and trying to make sense of it, or seeing a face in a piece of toast. Yes, you can go ahead and laugh. Hearing sounds that you can parlay into a melody. Working with a set of data and having some shape just jump out at you. It's how we make sense of the world. I also like this quote. We are, as a species, addicted to story. Even when the body goes to sleep, the mind stays up all night telling itself stories. Telling stories is something we do without even trying. And our brains continue to try making sense of things even when we're sleeping. We're hardwired to tell stories. And I would argue, in fact, I will argue, a liberal arts education is all about harnessing and honing your ability to evaluate and to tell stories. In a sense, you've spent your time here at St. Ben's and St. John's putting together a starter kit of tools for telling stories and for understanding and evaluating the quality of other stories. Over time, you'll go on adding new gadgets and get better at using the tools that you already have in your toolbox. And it doesn't matter whether you majored in a natural science, a social science, the humanities, or a fine arts discipline, you were learning how to make sense of the world through stories. I think it's important to know this because, like so many things in life, stories can be used for good or ill. We hear stories and they stick, whether we realize it or not, and they affect our actions, and more broadly, they affect the world. So, let me briefly illustrate my point with some stories from my own academic field of study, which is American economic history. I'm an economist who studies how economies evolve in historical time. I'm going to start with the Great Crash of 1929, a story that I would imagine many of you have heard. On Monday, October 29th, 1929, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 13%. Think about that. 13% of the wealth measured by the Dow Jones Industrial Average disappeared in a day. That's still the largest one-day fall in American history. According to a textbook widely used in Minnesota high schools, quote, "The crash brought on a nationwide economic crisis that we now call the Great Depression." That's probably the way you've heard the story, except it's not right. I hate to tell you that. Economists and economic historians have been pointing this out for over 60 years. The Great Crash didn't cause the Great Depression. The crash was one of many symptoms of deeper problems with the international economy, most of them associated with the after effects of World War I. What turned a recession in 1929 into a depression in 1932, or by 1932, was the stubborn insistence by the Federal Reserve and the Bank of England to follow another story, which is everything will be fine if you just stay on the gold standard. Now, if that sounds familiar, that's the point of The Wizard of Oz. Follow the yellow brick road is a metaphor for stay on the gold standard. The whole book was written with that in mind. Well, the Bank of England and the Fed stuck to that, and in particular, the Federal Reserve kept interest rates high to protect the gold standard and did nothing to stabilize the banking system in 1931 and 1932 as banks started to weaken and fail due to the high interest rates that were necessary. The implosion of the financial system, of which the crash was just an early sign, led to the Depression in the United States, the United Kingdom, and all over the world as households and businesses lost the ability to borrow and lend and caused spending to start grinding to a halt. So what? Who cares? That's just a story from the past, right? Well, it matters because this is not the story of the Great Depression that most people have heard, and it's not the story that they've internalized, right? Most people think stop the crash, prevent the depression. The reason I'm bringing this up is because this is what informed the reaction of many people in September of 2008, when stock market indexes started to fall. Members of Congress and the public cried, "Stop the stock market fall and we'll prevent the next Great Depression." They didn't understand, and that's partly economists' fault, maybe all our fault, that to prevent a depression, government policy needed to focus on rescuing the banks in particular, and the financial system in general. Congress reacted to this, along with most of the American people, of saying, you can't bail out the banks. That's nuts. Just keep the stock market from falling. Well, we got lucky. The chair of the Federal Reserve at the time was a man by the name of Benedict, and he happened to be one of the scholars who had put together the story of the Great Depression as being one of financial markets imploding. He didn't just know the story, he had helped write it. And he went about telling it. It took a concerted effort by Bernanke and others with the knowledge of the Great Depression to convince policymakers, both in Congress and the executive branch, that what needed to be done was to save the banks and, in fact, save any institution that functioned like a bank. They had to dislodge the story members of Congress and the public thought was true and tell a more convincing tale of what really happened in the 1930s and what needed to be done in 2008. They succeeded, almost too well. The panic stopped, and we had a serious recession, no doubt about it. But the economy never tipped into a deep downturn like the Great Depression. In the process, they've now created a new story that everybody remembers. Stop the banks from failing, and you'll stop a recession from happening. If this sounds familiar, this is why in just a few weeks ago, in March, the Fed stepped in and saved all the depositors at Silicon Valley Bank out in the Bay Area. The fear was one bank's failure would lead to other failures and a collapse of the financial system. So, great, we'll just pull out the 2008 playbook and follow it to prevent a recession. But was this the right story to apply? Well, I have my doubts. But that's a story for another time. My point here is that we need to get our stories straight. And this is true of whether they are about financial crises, about the efficacy of vaccines, about the meaning and interpretation of the Constitution, how to perform a piano sonata, even, given our audience here, what it means for a curriculum to embody and be imbued with the liberal arts. We have to get those stories straight. Now, there's a cartoon I saw years ago and still have. I scanned it, used to have it on paper. It shows 9 kinds of professors you'll probably encounter sometime in your life. It's from Matt Groening, the guy who created The Simpsons. And one of those professors is called the Single Theory to Explain Everything Maniac. In the cartoon, the professor is yelling, "The nation that controls magnesium controls the universe." And the caption under each professor is something to do with the advantage of that professor and the disadvantage. And the advantage of this professor is easy to remember. Disadvantage, often wrong. So, you now have the tools to join in this work. Whether you realized it or not, you're now writing the stories that we're going to live by for years to come. All I ask is that you use your skills to make them memorable and accurate. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Louis. To our newest chapter members, you now belong to the nation's oldest academic honor society, whose past members have included 17 U.S. presidents, 42 Supreme Court justices, and over 150 Nobel laureates. Your membership in Phi Beta Kappa will open a door to a network of successful individuals in nearly every career field, and this accomplishment will set you apart to future graduate school programs and to employers. As Dr. Johnson said at the beginning of his address, support the society's endeavors and goals, and be a dedicated advocate for the liberal arts and sciences in our society today. Once you are settled after graduation, check to see if there's a Phi Beta Kappa Community Alumni Association nearby. We here at the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University and the Theta of Minnesota chapter hope you stay connected with us as well. Let us know about your adventures, your challenges, and your successes as you move out into the wider world. And come back and share the stories that you get to create and to tell for us. Before we conclude our ceremony, I just have a few announcements. First, there's a reception following the ceremony just on the other side of our room here, which all of you are invited to attend. Second, after we process out, we'd like to take a group photo of our new inductees. So I've talked with Tommy here, and he's got a space for you over kind of in the atrium over there by the balcony where the piano kind of usually is. So we'll do a big group photo. We'll take the Phi Beta Kappa key, which you can take pictures with afterwards. Third, please help me thank all those who made our event possible today, including our student musician, Thomas Libby. The student videographers in the back there. And all the event staff here at St. Ben's. So let us conclude the ceremony with observations from William Cronin, author of the 1998 essay, Only Connect. He writes, quote, "Liberal education is built on these values. It aspires to nurture the growth of human talent in the service of human freedom. Education for human freedom is also education for human community. The two cannot exist without each other. We must be ever more aware of the connections that we have with other people and the rest of creation, and of the obligations we have to use our knowledge and power responsibly. In the end, it turns out that liberty is not about thinking or saying or doing whatever we want. It's about exercising our freedom in such a way as to make a difference in the world and to make a difference for more than just ourselves." End quote. And now I would like to invite the newest members of Phi Beta Kappa to please rise. On behalf of the entire Theta chapter of Minnesota, I would like to extend a heartfelt congratulations to each of you. It has been our joy as professors, administrators, and staff to accompany you in your learning. We know that you will continue to be the strength of a new generation. Leave here with our best wishes for your future and with our belief in you as champions of an education in the liberal arts and sciences. Let your love of learning be your guide to making a difference in this world. We at Theta Minnesota are so proud of you. We wish you all the best, and we await with great eagerness to see and hear about all that you will accomplish. As we process out, let's please have one last round of applause for our newest members of Phi Beta Kappa.